Yeah, go ahead. We have with us Provost Jones.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Representative Ladd, and thanks for inviting us here today to provide you an update. The two-page document in front of you is a summary of the work that we did in our first year. And what I'd like to do today is walk through that, as well as let you know kind of what's happened this fall and where I think we will be by the end of December is the goal. So HB 1530 is really centered on addressing this problem of community college students having very clear pathways that can be communicated to students in high school so that they see both a lower cost path if they want to use the community college on their way to USNH and a bachelor's degree. But also many students, in fact, I was just at an Association of Public and Land Grant Universities for the last couple of days. I just got back last night and went to an entire session where this is being discussed across the country, that about 65% of the community college students don't necessarily know what path they want to be on. So they need to have better guidance when they get into the community college. So how do we give them that guidance? And then the third thing that I think is equally important is to make sure that we have a map of where are those degree opportunities and how do they line up with the workforce needs of the state. So 3 committees came
Excuse
together.
me just for a second.
Mhm.
I was negligent. Mark, do you want to come up and be here at the same time? Because this is all, it's a collective effort of both
It
2-year
absolutely
and
is.
4-year system. And I apologize for leaving the chancellor behind. So Mark Rubenstein,
Bad
welcome.
visual. To that point, the first thing we did when HB 1530 was passed was we pulled together a team led by Leslie Barber in the Chancellor's office at CCSNH and Kate Zemer, who is the Senior Vice Provost for Academic Affairs at UNH representing the USNH system. Those two, working with faculty and staff across both systems, created 3 committees. The 3 committees were really looking to explore what transfer programs were going to be most appropriate to pursue. Many of those programs are very, very appropriate to transfer, kind of nursing to nursing, very straightforward, though there are some complications I'll discuss. Others, for example, if you're going for auto mechanics or a large equipment operation that exists at CCSNH, there is no parallel for a bachelor's degree. And then the third area was to explore existing pathways. As a definition, I would say there are 2 different ways of looking at pathways. One approach to pathways is to think about it as very, very linear. So you start out with an accounting major at the community college system that transfers course by course by course through to a bachelor's degree at one of the USNH campuses. Those pathways have existed for years between our 2 systems, but they're one by one by one. So we have 7 different community college campuses. We have 3 different USNH campuses. That's 3 times 7, 21 different MOUs that have to be signed for every degree path. It's not realistic. Another pathway approach is to have a universal pathway, and that's been our target in the work that we've been doing on 1530. The second area, which is also very, very interested, is a block grant, and the block grant takes 2 forms. So imagine that when you get your associate's degree from CCSNH, that automatically transfers lock, stock, and barrel into a degree path in one of the USNH institutions. Again, there's 2 flavors of that. One is that it is the entire major. The other is that it is just the general education requirements, which is fulfilled for the most part in the first 2 years. So it's very, very reasonable. Of those 4 pathways, the middle 2 is where we're focusing our energy, and in particular, the universal pathways. So the idea that if you come in and you know you want to study nursing, that there is a very clear pathway all the way through. What you'll see on the second page of the report, so that would be this list, not highlighted in yellow, but if you look carefully, you can almost see. This list represents our target pathways. It lines up very, very well with the workforce needs in the state. At this time, we have completed universal pathways for 10 of those programs. And the electronic version of this shows you which 10. I can
Yeah,
actually,
that'd be nice if we could have that. We could check them all.
yeah, so I will tell you, I'm going to read them off to you. So nursing,
Yeah.
business management, psychology, human services, business administration, accounting and finance, healthcare management, information technology, English, and history. Those are the ones that were completed as of the time of the writing of this report. I will tell you, we have 7 more that we believe are going to be completed by the end of December. And we are well on track to complete all of them within the 2 years of the HB 1530 bill. And we'll be updating you as we go.
Do you have a list of those 7 that you're, or are those
I
still
do not have that with me.
confidential?
It's not that they're confidential, it's that I just don't have the data in front of me. It's certainly well known. Unfortunately, Leslie Barber and Kate Zemer were not able to be with us today. So Mark and I are poor second choices to try and address your questions. But I can get that to you and will at the end of December or as soon as I have that list. We have run into some bumps. Many of those bumps are centered on faculty, and we're working through them one at a time. The community college system, you want to say something about the, pulling your faculty together in the summer and the work that they did there, Mark? I think that's a good model and something we want to plug into.
Yeah, again, for the last couple of summers, we've engaged our faculty disciplinary teams from across the 7 colleges to take a look at our curriculum, identify those courses that are equivalent, try and remove what are sometimes inconsistencies or barriers within our system so that we can identify courses that are comparable and should flow through both our system and to the university system seamlessly.
So we're actually trying to build on that model. One of the things that started right before HB 1530, but HB 1530 really put a bow on it, was we wanted to have better collaboration between our campuses. So working with Kristen Miller at White Mountains Community College, we've now pulled together a provost council that is the provost of all of the system campuses, both the 7 CCSNH and the 3 USNH. And to be clear, on the USNH system, they're called provosts and vice president for academic affairs. At the community college, they're all the vice president for academic affairs, sometimes with student affairs linked in there. We're now meeting every other month on this topic, and we're talking about how do we get faculty together in the summer, this coming summer, to leverage what the community college has been doing and get some faculty from USNH there. I'm very excited about that. I think the trickiest spot that we've run into is how do we get the faculty more familiar with one another? Because the block grant requires more of that familiarity. We've also been working on the transfer pathways, and there's some technology that we need to put in place to make it more effective. So there's some transfer software. I think I'm going to walk into the second part of this when I talk about transfer pathways. So I'm not sure I want to tell you everything on that front now, or we'll walk through that separately. I will say we're very excited about the work. We know that the total number of students transferring from the community college into the 4-year college has declined. But we were very excited at the last USNH Board of Trustees meeting. We were looking at the data and we realized that actually the USNH market share of the CCSNH graduates has gone up a little bit in recent years, and we want to keep increasing that. That's the goal we want to pursue. I'll stop there and see if there's any questions on that part before we talk about some of the other transfer pathway work.
Yes, Representative Mooney?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for that. I'm just sort of interested in these majors that you had us check off. Are they a first in line because of enrollment and interest of the student body? That's my first question. And then second is, I see elementary ed next to social studies, but I'm curious where future teachers are in the priority list for your pathways. Thank you.
Both are great questions. The answer is yes. The first thing we did was we mapped all of the community college majors, and we mapped all of the majors that they go into when they go to USNH. So part of that target list comes from that, because we didn't want to spend an enormous amount of time going after majors that didn't have a clear connection and there weren't a lot of students in there. So that's why, in fact, if you go 3 slides into the transfer pathway, there's a chart that shows enrollment, the enrollment chart that we looked at that has nursing at the top, business management, psychology. Those are the 3 largest enrolled majors coming from CCSNH. There are some opportunities to pursue some of these degrees that go more specifically into elementary and secondary ed. We now have a task force that was pulled together by the provost at USNH to explore kind of all those pathways. And the next step is to take that to the CCSNH partnership. We have some work to do there. We literally met with Commissioner Edelblue and several members of his staff. Late October was when we did that. I don't remember the exact date. And the 23rd. Thank you, Kathy. And they were very enthusiastic about us pulling that group together. And we reported on that on November 7th when we met with the community college vice presidents. And so there was lots of enthusiasm. Oftentimes with education, there are many other majors that take you into education. Education is the certification. It's the top off, right? So you come in as a math major, you come in as a social science or a history major, and then you get your education certification on top. Anything you want to share on the education side from the community college side?
Not at this time.
I have a question for you, and unfortunately, it's on the second page of our minutes, and I have a copy here. You don't have it there because it didn't get copied upstairs. But I'm going to read this paragraph right here. It followed when we were discussing this. You were giving us a background on education from World War II onwards, but I'll read this. The University New Hampshire system, UNSNH, University New Hampshire system, it must be, and Community College System of New Hampshire also provided a verbal update regarding the status and progress of HB 1530, establishing curricular transfer pathways between the Community College System of New Hampshire and the University System of New Hampshire. Progress is being made toward this end. An updated report will be made with the Community College System of New Hampshire and the University System of New Hampshire in June. Committee members did ask, and here's one of the questions which we asked: who decides if course credit is accepted from one institution to another? Wayne Jones responded that it is the departments and staff within the department that make the decision. The committee indicated concern: should an accredited course earned at one institution be accepted at another? Members expressed this scenario has been a concern for years, and I believe the senator is not here, was the one that asked this. And with full implementation of HB 1530, students may have a better understanding of credit transferability, especially within the Community College System of New Hampshire and University System New Hampshire institutions. Further discussion will occur upon receipt of the written status report, which we're receiving right now. So the question is that we are alluding to is that if you're taking a math course with you and you're accredited and it's an accredited course, why then, if the accrediting is being done by the same institution down in Boston or wherever, why is that not accepted at your level? Or, yeah, at your level.
Do you mind if I take a go with this?
Yeah.
So this has been the process we've been going through with our faculty. You would normally think, for instance, first year composition, college algebra, for instance, and pick your course is a relatively standard. Each course has specific learning outcomes, and what we've been asking our faculty to do across the college is confirm that the learning outcomes for each of these courses are in fact the same learning outcomes, that the courses aren't simply similar or comparable in name, but actually are achieving the same result. In some disciplines that may be less clear cut than others, but for instance, if you're looking at a sequence of math courses without having assurance that the core competencies in this course are the foundation for the course that follows, you don't want to set a student up for failure. So what we're asking our faculty to do in this process is ensure the learning outcomes for the courses are in fact the same learning outcomes. Without that background work being done by the faculty, you could find yourself in a circumstance where the course really isn't comparable and the student's preparation for what follows is insufficient.
If I could just pile on one thing. An important point to acknowledge is there's different accreditations. So when we talk about the New England Commission on Higher Education, NECHI, that is our primary accrediting body. They accredit on behalf of the Department of Education, but they don't look course by course. They look for, do you have the learning outcomes defined? They don't compare them. They just say, do you have them defined? And they look for continuous improvement. How are you getting feedback that is continuously letting you improve your courses, improve your curriculum? Some majors have separate accreditation that we hold that requires, that digs deeper, digs into the course level, the text level, What exactly is the student reading and doing? And we have to meet those. For example, in business, we are AACSB accredited. That's a top accrediting body. And they don't even accredit at the community college level. So there's a gap there. That's where we need the faculty to do exactly what Mark described. We're challenging our faculty to do the same as his, and we're asking them to talk to one another so that we make sure they're lining up wherever possible.
I will say that the heart of that question is central to a lot of our conversations. We're trying to remove barriers for students. HB 1530 gives us a framework to pursue that, but our accreditation through NETCHI still requires that faculty have control over the curriculum, if you will, authority to determine that the learning outcomes of this course brought in from another institution, in fact, satisfy the requirements of their programs.
Professor Milo, you had a question?
Yeah, I have 5 area questions. You just returned from a national meeting. How many states have a similar program that what we have here as far as the automatic matriculation into schools from community colleges?
I can't give you specific statistics. Some systems are combined. For example, the SUNY system is a system I'm very familiar with. The community college is part of the same system. Others are separated, just like ours are. Others have multiple state systems. So North Carolina, there's the state system, there's a UNC system, and then there's a community college system. So there's mixes. All of them right now are talking about how do we build these types of pathways and these types of block transfers. I would, based on my discussions, certainly less than half, probably less than the third, actually have them already built.
So it would be fair to say that New Hampshire is somewhat ahead of the head of the curve as it relates to
I'm not
For
sure I
this
go that
program?
far.
It's a steep curve. I would look at states like California, Virginia, and Florida that are probably decades ahead of us on some of these
Okay.
things.
Yeah.
And they tend to have very well-established systems with, in some cases, common course numbering that flows between the community college system and the university system, so the student knows that it's not only this course by name, but by number. This course lives at every institution.
Next question is, how are students notified of this particular opportunity for them to do this automatic matriculation so after they achieve their associate degree? So what's the process of making sure that they're aware that, and when do they give notice that they want to do that?
Well, we use this as an advising tool with students when they come on board, that if you're interested in a 4-year degree through the university system, this is the pathway for this program. So it's part of the advising. In fact, it's part of the recruiting opportunity when prospective students are considering that, the community college system.
One of the things that is being discussed right now as part of our working groups is how do we do that communication better? How do we get it to start in high school so that high school students know that this is an option? But we also very much need to have the partnership of the advisors at the community colleges, because so many students, 65% of students, are going to change their mind and change their path while they're in courses at the community college. So it's kind of an ongoing thing that we have to support.
I would submit that even at the high school level, counseling there as far as where students might want to go, that's another opportunity to at least, because there may be some students that no, I don't want, I'll get my associate degree because I want to get a particular badge or a particular certification. And the counselor at the high school level say, look, here's another opportunity for you to do that plus.
Go ahead.
I'm not here for a sales call today, but I'm going to use the opportunity. This is at the heart of our interest in expanding dual and concurrent enrollment,
exactly.
the early college program. If we can assist students and families in seeing both the benefit of opportunity and affordability while they're still in high school, not just to take courses randomly, but to take a structured entry into these pathways while still in high school, not only do I think it will help with affordability and access to post-secondary education, I think it's one of the ways in which we can increase the likelihood that students who are already thinking about college but often think about leaving the state to do that will find their way to our system and to the university system through those pathways. I think we can make this not just a close to graduation, here's a pathway, but embedded in grades 10, 11, and 12 as a real core opportunity
Thank
to
you.
strengthen the
Thank you.
state.
The next area I wanted to pursue is staff quality. There historically has been an arrogance around higher four-year colleges vis-a-vis that of two-year colleges. And so as you begin to look at the next area I'm going to talk about is content, but leading into content, how have you been able to deal with that arrogance about quality of staff at the four-year institutions vis-a-vis that of the two-year institutions, making sure that these staff at the two-year institutions are not in competition with those at the four-year institutions. So the question is to me, is that how is the quality of monitored at the two-year institutions as it relates to dealing with the four-year institutions?
Want me to go first, or you want to go first?
I'll go first on that one. You know, when you start asking that question about quality, and my mind turns to Dulcinea Kaufman and Kim Parada, two of our nursing program directors at Great Bay and at Manchester. Peter LaMonica and Dan Rochelle, a couple of faculty members in IT and in advanced manufacturing at Manchester. Eileen Glover, nursing faculty at River Valley. Quality faculty members preparing students. I think I've talked to this group before, certainly other House and Senate committees. 5 years in a row, New Hampshire has the distinction of the highest first-time NCLEX pass rate for associate prepared nurses anywhere in the country. That doesn't happen by accident. It happens because we have faculty who are committed to their discipline, committed to their students, committed to the work that they do as educators. And that type of quality is reflected across the curriculum for our students. So I'm not worried at all about quality. Well, I shouldn't say that. I'm not concerned that quality isn't being met. We're worried about quality, but not that it isn't being met.
I think I would second that. I'm not worried about quality at the community college system or at the four-year college system, but I acknowledge that some, and especially historically, there's been this arrogance for different job types. You know, if you are a professor at UNH that has responsibility not just for teaching classes, but also for doing research and working in partnership with the state and other organizations, that is a very, very different task than being a faculty member at a four-year college or at a community college. We recruit nationally, and we recruit faculty that have terminal degrees and experience in the field, and all of our campuses do a great job, I think, of doing that. Where we need to do a better job, and where I'm very, very pleased, is we need to be sharing that data and getting the communication going between the faculty. I think the NCLEX is a great example. That passage rate is the same passage rate that we worry about at the four-year college. And so when our four-year college faculty see the two-year college faculty hitting those numbers, hitting those marks, they gain confidence in one another. The last thing I'll say is our faculty are a distribution. They are not a monolith. And we will never eliminate arrogance any more than we will eliminate faculty that underperform and are removed as a result of our annual or 3-year or 5-year reviews, depending upon what their rank is. The bulk of our faculty, however, value and are working on these learning outcomes. And when we can get those learning outcomes aligned, and we can have the faculty working together to get them aligned, then they have confidence in one another. And I think that's how you move the needle. And I think that's the work we're doing right now.
Thank you. That moves me into the next area. You talked earlier about competency targets within respective courses, et cetera. So is that the way that you guarantee the quality of the content at the two-year institutions as students are looking for a particular major, et cetera? Is that the competency questions that provide the continuity between the institutions?
I don't think it's necessarily competency. I think we have competency at all levels. I think what we need to do is make sure that the learning outcomes being taught within the competency of the faculty member align with what's needed for those later level courses. So as I think about it, I think about we do not want to set a student up to fail at the next level. And you can have a very competent faculty member teaching a first year course that just doesn't cover all the topics because they're not as comfortable with it. And then at the next level, because that course gets transferred, we don't get covered. That's why you got to get the faculty together and make sure they're covering the same learning competencies,
Thank you.
learning outcomes.
And thank you for taking my questions. The final one deals with, is there a
This is
certain,
the last one, right?
it is the last one, yes.
Good.
Is there a certain grade point that a student has to have in order for that, for them to qualify, transferring it to the four-year institution?
Yes. So if you're transferring generic credit, you have to have a passing grade of, I think it's C.
C or better.
Yeah,
C,
C or
okay.
better. Now, coming back to one of your earlier questions and embellishing a little bit on what Mark said, Mark is absolutely right. Those systems that do this the best get their course numbering lined up. That's a heavy lift. The next level is when within your pathway you can define a degree, a grade level that automatically transfers in. So California has been working in some of their pathways to say, well, if you're coming out of the community college with a B or better, or a B plus or better, you're automatically admitted into the next level and to transfer right into the system. I think those are discussions that are going on right now. That's where we want to go.
Thank you for answering my questions.
And I'd like to follow up on the business here of the A, B, C, D, or what your point average might be. I know that when I went to college for my B bachelor's degree, a C was really tough to get in some areas because that now the level of competency of some of those I see coming out with A's or a 4.0, it's not a whole lot better than those that came out with a 2.0 back in the days. So what kind of criteria and competency are you using to say this is a 3.0 or this is, wherever it might be? Or is it still pretty much subjective based upon Professor Mooney here, that this is what I see as a, an average grade, or this is a superlative grade right here? Is there criteria established or not
So
between the two systems?
great.
Or-
So between the two systems, no. Grade inflation has been a problem for decades.
Yeah.
It's a problem in the K through 12 system. It's
Yeah.
a problem at the community college. It's a problem in higher education across the country. Those places where we have the clearest learning outcome set is where you get the best correlation with grades. There is some subjectivity to it, particularly in some disciplines. It's something that I worry about. I look at grade reports every single semester, and we have conversations with department chairs and with the deans about, hey, is this really the trend that we want to have? I think it's something we're going to continue to work on. It is hard to go back and compare. What you can do, and what we encourage all of our faculty to do, is take advantage of nationally standardized tests whenever possible, so that we have some benchmark to compare to. And at the four-year colleges, we also rely on our external evaluations for disciplinary peers that come in. The American Chemical Society, the American Physical Society, the nursing CCNE comes in, and they do deep dive evaluations on most of our majors. And they're looking for how is it doing compared to other universities across the country. So that's the other way we try and balance it. But it's an issue, and we have to pay attention to it.
Yeah, I would imagine it would be in this last part and this that I have, but I look at, for example, the enrollment at maybe the community college system. You're probably going to have a higher age bracket person coming into the community college system who is also looking for specific skill orientation so they can be out in industry. They may not be good at taking a praxis that we have as teachers have to take, but they may know how to teach. They may know how to fix that and pull that wrench and do what they need to do. So how how is this being gauged? You know, I know, I think I understand, you know, that part in terms of coming out of and working at the community colleges, but are those programs at the four-year system recognizing that there's different styles of learning and there's different, you know, and a person may be able to do it. It may be just Mr. Brown that can teach just as well as Dr. Brown. So,
So the grades transfer as long as it's a C or better, they transfer. And so bottom line, yes, it's being recognized from the community.
we're going to take a break and welcome Senator D'Alessandro to our meeting today. I hope the traffic wasn't too bad out there.
Well, there was a big accident that closed down the through lane. Traffic took about 45 minutes. I believe. We have to drive slower because they snap each other up quick and fierce. It's great for the repair business. Thank you very much.
We're talking about transferability of programs from one level to the next level.
We've worked on that for 30 years. Walter Peterson and I worked on that. We thought we had transferred all set. Yes, that was not the case.
Well, it sounds like we're moving there.
Good.
So where were we here?
You were asking about grade transferability and
Is
there-
a C, a 3.0 the same at yours as at your system?
what I will say is we accept the grade in transfer as long as it's above a C. Are they equivalent? For some students, yes. For other students, no. But we don't get down to the individual course level in making those decisions.
Are there any other questions here? I do have one more. I'm looking at nursing right at the top of it, and I'm sitting beside a nurse here. If you're a nurse and you're coming out and you have that 2-year ticket to be a nurse, and you'd like to go on and maybe get into biomedicine or to some other aspect of the medical field, audiology, are your courses that you took, I don't want to call them gen ed, but they're pretty specific to nursing, anywhere you do, are those going to be accepted in the other program? It might be somebody that's majoring in nursing at the 4-year system. Are those basic courses going to be approved for that other degree? So are they transferable within the system and between systems?
So I want to make sure that I'm answering the question that you're asking.
Yeah.
So you're saying this is a student that's been successful taking their associate's degree in nursing, and they now want to transfer into a 4-year college, but they're going to pivot a little bit because they're attracted. They want to go into other allied health fields. And so the question is, will those courses transfer into that other field, biomedical engineering or something? The answer is, right now, they would come over as general credit, and then the advisor would go through the transcript and say which ones count and which ones don't if they if they go to a different pathway. For example, the math that you would need for an associate's degree in nursing is not the same math you would need to pivot into an engineering field if you wanted to go to biomedical engineering. That's okay. We'll take that in that advising conversation and say, you know, all of these transfer, you get the general education credits, but now you have to take this additional math course. Those conversations take place. What we'd like to do as we work on these pathways, and nursing is a great example, is make sure that we have the pathway defined so that some of those shifts are defined for the student before they come across. So for example, let's pick on nursing. There are several allied health programs that take all of those nursing credits right across. And we know that now because we've looked at them. But if you get too far afield, you might have to pick up an additional math. We'd like to be able to define those sooner for the students so they know it before they complete their time in the community college.
Further questions? Okay. Yes, Senator.
Transferability has been a significant problem throughout our system, which I've never really understood, to be honest with you. And as I said, we worked on this for years. Governor Peterson and I were on this commission. In today's world, we have limited space, particularly, let's refer to the nursing situation. So you get an associate degree at, say, at the community college level, and you want to transfer to a BSN. And first of all, space is a problem, but if you can't move everything that you've taken at the associate degree level, and you have to repeat or get certain courses, what you're doing is extending the time for that individual. And there's a cost situation involved in that, because the kid went to the initial program to get the associate degree in order to expedite, moving forward. But the problem I see is the kid gets discouraged when they bring that transcript to you, and we talk about allied health, this, and this, and the kid finds out, geez, I've got 60 credits that for my associate degree, and all of a sudden half of them don't fit, and I got to retake them or do something else. Can't we create some kind of a synergy between the associate degree programs and what we expect for the baccalaureate degree? Because the law now says you got to have a baccalaureate degree. I worked on a situation recently where we're allowing, regular RNs to practice and not to get their BSNs until a later date. But we're putting pressure on people to get more education, and yet we're stymieing them in terms of the transferability.
Senator, I'm going to draw on 17 years in the University of New Hampshire, another 7 with Granite State, 4 coming with the community college system. We have relatively few instances where a student would find that kind of a derailing situation. Unless a student is making a significant change where their associate degree was in business, but now they want engineering, or their associate degree was in nursing and now they want engineering. In almost any program that's generally aligned, there may still be some small disruptions there, but using nursing as the example, the longest established program, 3+1 RN to BSN between the two systems, allows a student in the community college system to finish not just the associate degree, but the 3rd year toward the 4-year degrees. And in transferring to the university system through what is now College of Professional Studies, not only having all of those courses flow through, but actually retaining the community college system tuition rate to finish that degree. So there are some very well-crafted pathways and relatively few situations like the one that you and Governor Peterson began to try and overcome 30 years ago. We've gotten better.
If you don't mind, if you would go to page 1, 2, the 3rd page in your pack has a list. Next one. Yeah, that list. So that is the list of the pathways right now, as it was at the time of the writing of this report. 10 of those now have those pathways defined exactly the way you want it to be. There's 6 or 7 more coming on by the end of December, and we will complete this entire list by the end of next year. Just so you know, I think a key point, and you implied it, but I want to call it out. Another part of this, to make sure we're not costing students more money, is we have to get that advising to them sooner. We need to let them know this pathway exists, and if they take this courses in sequence at the community college, then they will be able to graduate within that 4-year window that you talked about.
I'll also remind that the language in House Bill 1530 describes the optimizing the affordability and utility of the community college system. So in some ways, like the 3+1, maybe not quite as clearly as 3+1, what we had anticipated is students could progress within the community college system beyond just 60 credits to fully leverage the alignment that's being created, capitalize on the convenience, the access, and the quality, as well as the affordability as they make that transition.
That's great. That's great news. But I'm thinking of now, St. Joseph's wanted an associate degree program. All right, so I fixed that for them, so they got the associate degree. Now, how are those people being? How do we make sure that they can move through this portal in the same fashion? Because it seems to me, with the shortage that's occurring all over the country, that these nursing schools that shut down themselves, they all had nursing schools. We had nursing school at New Hampshire Hospital, and all of a sudden we let it go. Now they're reinstituting them. Now who oversees their situation, and how does that kid make a transition, or is it
So-
covered?
So at the four-year college, we all of our campuses have transfer portals that you can come through. Right now, we're working in collaboration with CCSNH to have a common portal so that exists. The course equivalencies exist for many different institutions. That we probably have about 100 different institutions. Mark was at UNH when we were setting the beginning of those up. So a student coming from a St. Anselm's, if they wanted to transfer in, absolutely could. And where that course equivalency already exists, it's taken care of. If it isn't, we go through and we do the course by course checking to help that student come through. So where my head is going is into nursing, where I think we have a bigger challenge right now that high school students aren't choosing to go into nursing. The number of applications across our systems into nursing is going down. And so we have a broader national and statewide problem of how we make that degree path more attractive.
Is that, I thought we were at a point where we had more, I thought we were at this peak here. Are we now going back down from that peak?
That's what we're seeing at the four-year college. I don't know the community college data, but that is what we're seeing across the country at four-year college.
The pandemic had a detrimental effect on healthcare interest in careers. I mean, it's created a lot of wear and tear on those folks who are there, and I think it has dissuaded many people who are interested. I'll offer you an interesting fact, though. Last year, we had 416 students enrolled in our nursing programs across the community college system. 79 of them already held a bachelor's degree in some other discipline. So our nursing students have always been somewhat older group than traditional age students, coming typically from other career paths. And in that regard, I still think we'll find students who have the interest, not necessarily coming directly out of high school, but folks who recognize that calling later in life.
Okay, before we go with a whole lot more questions, we're nearing 11 o'clock.
Yeah, I'm watching. If we
I
could
saw you
wrap
looking
it
at
in
your
5
watch.
minutes, that would be great.
Are there any areas that you would like to speak to before you have to get out of here, Wayne?
It turns out the questions have taken us through,
Okay.
I think, many of the things that we're working on for transfer pathways. I'm very, very appreciative of the collaboration with the community college system. At our last provost council meeting, this is the group of all the provosts and vice president for academic affairs for all of our campuses at CCSNH and USNH. We all said to ourselves, we need to think more carefully about how we communicate this partnership out. And so we'll be working with Mark and with Kathy and others to think about how we do that communication in the
Yeah,
spring.
I'm going to represent Mooney here in a second, but my last thing before you head out, over 60% of our kids go outside the state of New Hampshire to go to college, university. Are we going to get some transfer pathways to have kids from UMass, Lowell, or from UMaine, Orono, Southern Maine, all those colleges around us and universities say, hey, we'll transfer your credits in here and we'll take you as a junior or whatever to get those kids coming back to our state. Where are we on this?
We do that. In fact, so the number of transfer students at UNH increased by nearly 5.5% this year. Most of it was New Hampshire residents that had left the state and decided to come back. And so what we're discussing now is how do we do more advertising and more promotion in that space? We literally created a program where we communicated with all of the students that were admitted to UNH last year that did not choose to come. We invited them to come back and offer them the same financial aid package if they wanted to come back to New Hampshire. I think we have to do more creative things like that. It's not a curricular problem. The curricula transfers pretty smoothly. It's more of a making sure that they feel welcomed and that they feel that there's a place for them to go.
Representative Mooney, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And the senator reminds me of something very key to all of this, I think. And that is on the high school level, the guidance department keeps a very close track of the students, ideally, even divided by alphabetical names so that they know who's on track to graduate. The idea being that there is no major surprise a month or a semester before graduation that this student is not uh, qualified because they're missing a course or they don't have the proper grade, etc., to avoid that surprise. So I guess my question is to avoid the surprise of having all of these credits and doing all these things and then it doesn't go through, who my question is, I guess, two ways. First, who right now is keeping track of that? And you did mention the keyword advising, so that's going on. And then, second of all, if it's necessary, where in this bill would it be that they would be advised and tracked essentially to avoid any major disastrous surprise at the end of their community college journey?
I'll offer that one thing to know about our students is about 70% of them are part-time students. So the pace at which they go through is a reflection of their lives. And so stopping in, restarting. So it's not necessarily one semester. What might look like the next semester may in fact be a year out. Problem for our students, registrar is probably the person most aware of what the student's progress is toward a degree, and their advisor. I think what Provost Jones described earlier was some software solutions that we may look at that would allow a student to actually map their degree progress, not just to complete the degree with us, but the alignment toward the transfer into the university system. There's a product that the university system is adopting now that one of our campuses has already initiated. That may prove to be a solution that allows us to have a little bit more surveillance and vigilance on that point.
Yes, Senator.
Just have a comment. I want to make a plug for the nursing program. I think a lot of people don't know what a nurse does. And if 2 years of nursing opens up a field, and there are so many different areas within nursing that you can go. You can go for your baccalaureate and you can be a floor nurse, but you have specialties within nursing. You have IV nurses that are just fantastic, setting drips and whatever. You have pediatric nursing. You have clinical nursing. You have nurses who work in the community clinics. So I think that it would behoove us to let people know what does being a nurse mean. It doesn't mean just one thing. It's a whole field that is open, and I think the 2 years gives you basic understanding of what's going on, but it does not prepare you for all of these other areas, and you have to continue. Maybe some of your basic stuff you already know, but you need to go into more depth. You need to have more clinical understanding, more anatomy and physiology. You need to understand more about systems in order to progress. And I think if that opens up, and I think people see the opportunities, I think that it's going to go a long ways.
Well
That's
said.
why I have this cardiology nurse sitting beside me.
Well,
Yes, Representative Mylan.
The student population is declining. Competition is out there. How are you dealing with that?
So there was a study done around 2012-13 that we've been tracking. A professor named Graw published a very nice report that talked about the demographic cliff. The demographic cliff is hitting different states differently, but in New England, we're getting hit hard. He projected in 2015 that we would see a decline of about 17 to 18% overall in the number of students graduating from high school and choosing to go to college. Notice those are two separate pieces, both going in the wrong direction. They hit campuses differently. Community colleges get hit differently than four-year colleges get hit differently than research centers. Where are we today in New England? We're about 2/3 of the way through the decline. It has hit different campuses differently. As we look at that same data going forward, what do we see? We see that we're kind of, as for four-year colleges, we are probably at about the level we're going to be 10 years from now. So we've hit a point where we can say, all right, this is going to be our size. How do we deal with it over the next 10 years? However, in the next 10 years, we're going to see a wave that goes up for a couple of years, and then we're going to see it drop down for a couple of years, and then it's going to come back. So that we have this sine wave coming through. The challenge in New England, particularly for four-year colleges, and Mark can speak to the two-year colleges, how do we make sure we're built for the right size? And I believe that size is about where we are now. And then not grow inappropriately for the next couple of years while the wave goes up, and be in a position where we can strategically invest so that when the wave goes down again, we remain stable and keep improving the quality of education like we've always done.
I'm gonna approach this question a little bit differently and disagree a little bit in the sense, I would make the case that the need for post-secondary education is going to be greater over the next 20 years than it has been, just because of the pace of change in technology, the changes in industry. Creation of biofabrication as an industry in New Hampshire, something that didn't exist 20 years ago, is going to create great demand. The need for succession in virtually every industry is going to require more education, but it's not going to be 18-year-old high school graduates. That part is accurate. I'm going to say that specific to the 18-year-old high school graduates, one of the things this October, the most recent report on free and reduced lunch, statewide, 24% of children K through 12 are eligible for that. Manchester, close to 50%. Franklin, almost 60%. Berlin, Claremont, you go through the state and you can find places where 30, 40, 50% of students. So the need for affordability. So even though the number of 18-year-olds may begin to level out, the need for access to affordable post-secondary education for that group is going to be greater. It's going to put more pressure on both the university system, but the community college system, and these pathways and the Running Start programs to allow us to help students make that leap. Right now, the community college system, almost 40% of our enrollment is 25 or older. And going back to the example of nurses who come to that career later than post-high school, I think we're going to see more students, more adult learners who are going to need more education over time, shorter programs where they live, online, accessible, so they can continue with their families, with their jobs, with their lives while they prepare for whatever comes next. So I think that there's a demographic turn that affects 18-year-olds, but the broader picture of our state's demographics, I think, produces a much more complicated view of post-secondary for us.
Senator?
Thank you. Have you finished, Bill? I think two things that occur to me are, A, the competition is dramatic. I've seen the UMass ads, and I know Marty Meehan. Okay, so you got a congressman who's now the president of the university, who's selling that university with significant resources. So that competition, we talk about this, we're the second oldest state in the United States. All right, so unless we get a surge of people, and we're going to have a problem for an extended period of time. So competition. Price becomes significant. I was listening to NPR this morning. You've held the price again. It's stable for what, 25, 24, 25. All right.
Yep.
So that
6
that
years in
news
a row.
that news was on the radio this morning. So the nature of the beast is changing. We're in a highly competitive market. Now, when I was a student in high school coming, UNH was like primo. If you got into UNH, you were really on top of the world. And now I see you can get into Maine, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and the competition is fierce. I never in my life thought I'd see billboards announcing college. Come here because it's cheaper, or I mean, I see those all over.
Time.
And does that denigrate the quality, the idea of education? We're selling it like a product, you know. I mean, I see it. It's disturbing to me to see a billboard that says "Come here because it's cheaper." never mind quality. I mean, if I would love to see a billboard. that
How
says,
about a beer truck with
Right.
Go Black Bears
right,
inside of it?
right. This is the,
Yeah.
you know, this is, come because it's a wonderful school. You're going to get a great education, and your chances of doing better in life are good. I just think the competition, in my opinion, is fierce.
You got to go, Wayne,
I have,
quickly, so
I have to go, so I'm going to.
could you address a
I'm
little
going to
bit
give a quick response and a brief wrap. I worry about that too. I worry about that for our society. I think the most important thing we could do is focus on the value of the education. And something UNH is very proud of is for 3 years in a row now, we've been in the top 10 in the country for best value in public higher education in the country. I think that the price wars, for lack of a better phrase, and the change in student behavior at the 18 to 24-year-old level have caused some of that shift. I think the future is going to be thinking more broadly about the other things that the university brings to the table. 20% of our students are graduate students getting master's degrees and PhDs. 20,000 students took advantage of individual courses and took advantage of extension programs and professional development and training. Those are areas where we're having a massive impact, and we need to grow that, and it's a revenue stream. I answered your question directly, but my colleague could not be more correct that there's lots of growth elsewhere. We grew the number of transfer students. We grew the number of graduate students. We grew the number of students taking professional development and training and getting micro-credentials and certificates. That, I think, is where we have to focus for the future. I'll finish with just one brief comment, and that's a thank you to my colleague at CCN, SNH, and the teams that have been doing this work. I didn't do any of this work. Leslie and Kate on our team and all the faculty working on each of those degree programs have done a great job, and they're embracing it. You know, the arrogance that we referred to earlier, we're not seeing it. I think that we're seeing collaboration, and that's the way we're going to be successful.
Thank you, Wayne. I do have one, you can go, but this is more directed for Mark. I'm not,
Oh, good.
we have a teacher shortage in this state. And we have a number of paraprofessionals that are working in schools that are saying, I want to become a teacher. While we have alternative pathways for that, we've spoken with Steve Appleby regarding that. However, for those folks to decide to take some of their courses at your level, at the community college level, are you seeing that increasing? And if so, are there any issues in the transferability of those courses that you're taking? Because it's not one of those 10 that have been checked off. Hopefully it's on the 7 that are you thinking closely to. But are what they do at the community college system, let's say at White Mountain, is that able to transfer into the PSU education program without loss of any of the coursework?
It is, and Plymouth State and President Burks and his team have been good enough to allow students to actually finish bachelor's program in Berlin by sending faculty to deliver, so that students from White Mountains don't have to travel to Plymouth to complete that bachelor's degree. So that has not been a problem. We're not seeing an increase, but I will say one of the innovative opportunities has been with apprenticeship, resource that we have through Apprenticeship New Hampshire. CCSNH is the hub for that activity. We've got a number of students currently enrolled in apprenticeships to become educators, and it creates another certification strategy for particularly working adults who can't afford to take time away to gain the credential.
So most of these people are adults. They're not, students coming in at age 18. So when they want to go get their junior and senior year, are there any problems in the transferability of that coursework to the 4-year system that you're counting either with PSU, with Keene, or with UNH?
I don't believe we're seeing barriers for that program at this time. And again, you're right. Our adult learners are often tied to the communities they serve. They can't go away to college. They're not going to migrate from Littleton to, travel to Durham 3 times a week for classes. So online is increasingly important, and the ability for the coursework that they can do locally to be applicable to degrees integral to the success of that program.
Any other questions? Down the road a ways, we want to be talking about online. I've seen some of the percentages of kids that are at students at the community college. That seems to be a program that's expanding.
Online instruction, obviously the pandemic created a surge in the need for remote instruction. But post-pandemic, now that we're down to what might be a new normal, across the system, about roughly 30% of our credit activity is occurring through online instruction. It varies by college from about 22% to almost 50%, high water mark being at River Valley. River Valley has a number of healthcare related programs, draws students throughout the state. So the clinical is concentrated on certain days and certain locations, but the didactic, the opportunity to deliver the course content is increasingly online to make that more accessible to students from greater distances.
Speaking of online, maybe we'll get to this, but what I'm concerned about is kids at the high school level at taking these virtual courses and choosing not to go to school. My granddaughter chose not to go to school, but to take her courses virtually. And she did that for 2 years in high school, the last 2 years of high school. I find that to be a very dangerous situation. You lose sociability, you lose interaction with teachers as well as fellow students, et cetera. Are we going to an online world here? And what does that present as a challenge?
The state has already made a significant investment in VLAX.
Yes.
And for a lot of students, that's a complementary opportunity for their education. They attend a high school, but it gives them access to courses that might not otherwise be available, allows them more scheduling flexibility. I spent, as I said, about 7 years at Granite State College, and virtually everything we were doing was online pre-pandemic. But if you would talk to students, there's a preference for sitting face-to-face often, but that preference loses out to conflicts with job, with family, with other responsibilities. I think that there's a balance that's at play there where students may prefer to be in class and with their peers, but have to navigate those competing pressures. It's one of the reasons why I think this is an area of growth for the community college system, is that we have the capability to deliver high quality online programs, but we also have the opportunity at 11 locations around the state to have those students physically sit with their peers, with faculty, engage services. And I do think that that's where the world is heading, is more balance of online access, but in person when you need it and when you can do it.
It raises a lot of questions. It's one of the questions that pops in my mind. I'm sure you've heard it many times. So you have 1/3 of your kids online, and you have all these capital assets, facilities, which are now maybe half full or third full, whatever it might be. Then we have this deferred maintenance associated with it.
All the questions
yeah,
that we wrestle with all the time. We currently have career counselors from New Hampshire Department of Health and Human Services Employment Support Bureau who are regularly on our campuses, gives them access to locations, gives us access to informing them about our program opportunities for the clients that they're serving. You're familiar with our Littleton Academic Center for White Mountains Community College, which hosts a New Hampshire Employment Security and a Head Start program. So we do have, in some instances, capital assets, buildings that are larger than they may currently serve, but we are looking actively at where we can build partnerships with state agencies, with other organizations whose missions and clients align with our mission and could create synergies that would be better use of facilities and create more value for the communities.
Are there any more questions we're getting into an area that I'm sure that will be discussed in the future. But Mark, I want to thank you very much for coming today and taking us through some of that. We do have some other items on the docket here, which you may want to get involved with. The next one that we have, and we went through the pathways here, workforce needs and that. But we're talking now about Kathy Provencher. We're talking about the governor's executive order, the task force to realign or to align post-secondary education in our state. And there's also a follow-up LSR, which is very similar. I, I don't know even where to start on this thing. Kathy?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Catherine Preventure, and I serve as the Chief Administrative Officer of the university system. Happy to be here with Chancellor Rubenstein. Yes, the governor on October 25th issued Executive Order 2003-06, establishing a task force for strategic alignment between the two public higher education systems and to think about what we need for the future for public higher education in the state. Chancellor Rubenstein and myself both sit on that commission. The Commissioner of Education has designated Steve Appleby, the Director of Higher Education in the Department of Ed. The Senate President has designated Senator Gray. The Speaker has designated Representative Ladd and Representative Luno. Community College System has named Nick Toompas and Ed Smith from its board, and the University System Board Chair has named Jackie Eastwood and George Hansel. And we await appointments from the governor's office from two representatives of business and industry, and whether or not the governor himself or a designee will serve. And the governor is also shall select the chair of the task force. And so the work is to be completed by March 31st. I do think that's going to be a heavy lift for the task force, which Representative Ladd, your LSR, may be completely appropriate to continue with the work of any recommendations that come out of this task force by March 31st. That's really all we have to report at this time.
If we could
Chancellor
turn
Rubens-
to page 2 on the task force that the governor, through his executive order, has put in, and the task force shall, I think want to make it pretty clear that there's no mention of the word merger at all
Correct.
within this whole process. We're looking at the investigating the possibilities of what a strategic alignment might net us in terms of enhancing post-secondary education in this state. And so could you address those bullets under B? I know that you've worked very closely with Chancellor Rubenstein in some of the areas that we have there. A, the language was tried to come at mutually. Is there anything there that jumps out at you, or is?
To be honest with you, what jumps out at me is the bullets under item B. All need to be considered. It's going to be challenging to really dig into all those items by March 31st. So I think the task, in my opinion, the task force needs to start with, what do we look like? What do we need a decade from now? And how best do we get there? But there are 10 plus members on the task force. I'm only one. And these items, the executive order requires the task force to look at all these items, so it certainly will. But time is going to drive how deep we dive into each one of those bullets. And that's why I think the LSR may serve as, there may need to be follow-up after March 31st on a number of the points of the work of the task force.
Mark, are you kind of in concurrence with that the March deadline, I concur, that's why in the LSR you don't see that March date, you see the end of the year. However, this is a huge topic, and with all the issues that are associated with it right now.
The Community College System Board has already been having similar discussions about what the future looks like. And your observation, there's no reference to merger. I'll say that I'm less thinking about what we look like, but I am thinking more about what we need, who the students will be, how they'll be served. The discussion earlier about the that adult learners, the need for education available locally, online, accessible, shorter programs. I do think that we are in a period where higher education is changing. What the demands of what we deliver are going to be different, at least some of them. And I think that we've got to flesh out what the deliverables will be, what the need will be before we figure out anything that has to do with structure. If we start trying to make adjustments to structure before we understand the need, I think we potentially put ourselves in the wrong direction. So I do think it's a relatively short period of time, and I do hope that part of the work of the task force is to get a more clear understanding of what post-secondary education really looks like in 10 years, so that we're building something for the future.
And I will say that the benefit of the March 31st timeline is the urgency of the work. So again, I don't think it will be the end of the work that needs to be done. But so it demonstrates there's an urgency. Let's start the work in earnest and go to the next, whatever the next piece of work is related to the needs of our state with post-secondary higher ed, public post-secondary higher ed.
We mentioned the word affordability quite a bit in the morning earlier today. Is affordability one of the components that would come in for discussion, and when we're looking at the overall alignment and structuring of our university post-secondary systems?
Oh, I think absolutely that's part of the public mission.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think it's implicit in raising educational attainment. It's implicit in improving accessibility and compatibility for students. And on the expense side, the avoidance of duplication, the streamlining, it's our managing the expense side so that we can better insulate students and families from the cost side.
Is there other questions on this right now? Representative Mooney?
Well, just a comment. It comes to mind in thinking more and more about March 31st, that is more or less crossover, I think, for the House. And I know a certain committee in the House that's going to be very busy and a chairman who's going to be very busy during that time period. So just budget that in. That's my comment. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll try to budget that in. Maybe schedule it in is a better word. It's when you take the 7 institutions that you have, Mark, and the 3 Granite State is now merged in with, so we have 3 there, so we have 10 higher education institutions in the state that serve a population that's from high school. We have high school kids involved with concurrent dual enrollment. We have up to, people that are 90 years old still working at it. So it's when you take our state and our population of this state and you take the square miles in this state that we have on a per capita basis, is it sustainable to have 10 post-secondary institutions and have a source of revenue that we currently have? Is this structure that we have now sustainable?
Not sure how to answer that question. And there are certainly larger states, but have far more institutions, both public and private, than the 27 institutions, public and private, here in New Hampshire. As I said earlier, if I'm right about the fact that the future requires more support for adult learners, and for a lot of those students, a balance of online but local access, then having those touch points around the state is going to continue to be important for meeting the need of that population. I think it's also fair to say that the footprint at White Mountains compared to the footprint at UNH or Plymouth, they're not all the same. It's not 10 equally large So part of it is not just 10 locations, but are the facilities at those locations and the use for those locations appropriate for what the demand will be? As I described earlier, we've recognized that we've got some, in some cases, some capacity that's not being as optimally used as it could be. And we are trying to find partnerships, ways to use that space more effectively for the benefit of those communities. And in doing that, we can presumably reduce some of the overhead for those locations while sustaining the viability of that location for delivering the programs we need.
My answer is I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of us do.
I know we're looking right now at how we start, well, we already have started to shrink our space. We just demolished 2 residence halls at Keene. We're undergoing a master planning effort across the system right now to think about how we continue to shrink the footprint or reuse or parts of the footprint. So
Time will tell. Time will tell. I don't think there's any need to really go through the LSR. The LSR is backup. That is to really support process if it's needed. The makeup of that commission committee is a little bit different, but very, very similar. So,
Representative Bland, if I may ask a question?
yes.
What does distinguish your LSR from the executive order is the use of the word consolidation. And I am interested to know whether that is part of your thinking about the future, is consolidation of post-secondary education, whether that implies merger, or if that really is more just generally your question about 10 colleges and the scale of the footprint.
I don't think that any terminology should be taken off the table. I do believe in consolidation, it can be done internally within one of the systems. I reflect on what happened with taking the athletic training program out of Durham and shipping it up to Don Burke's up in Plymouth State. Are we going to be able to sustain, all the separate types of programs which we have in education? I know the book that maybe you handed out to the trustees, Chancellor, the book which talked about synergy and having to deal with these situations right off here, and we looked at Henderson. The individual, the third party that got engaged in looking at that, made the statement within that book that 2/3 of students in these universities that he's worked with are in basically 12 type programs. We have a lot of other programs. And so all those other programs which we have, both at Keene, at Plymouth, UNU, can we, due to the cost elements, consolidate some of the programs internally? Now, I'm not talking at the university systems, but working collaboratively to try to bring programs together so we can still have a physical therapy program somewhere in our state. So we can have these types of programs. That's one way of looking at.
That's helpful. I just wanted to understand the intent of the word consolidation, and that makes sense to me.
Yeah. Yes, Representative Myler.
Well, I guess one of the questions you look at higher education is, I've got a 14-year-old and an 11-year-old grandson and granddaughter, and I've often thought, and what's ahead of them in higher education? And one of the issues I think that we might be going towards is that rather than a Bachelor of Arts degree, people are beginning to get all kinds of badges and certifications and short-term kinds of programs that are hands-on, that aren't not necessarily the old liberal arts program that you were prepared really for nothing and until you got your first job, and that's when you really begin to realize what's available there. And so that's as I've been thinking about their future, that's a thought that's been going through my head is what are they going to do? And I know that the community college system does a terrific job as it relates to looking at, a student can leave there with a Microsoft certificate, and start with an $80,000 job. I'm assuming UNH also has begun to look at their programs from a standpoint of certification programs. And so the question I have, what then is a competition between the community college system of badging and badging at higher education? And so that's one of the issues, I think, as you look at this whole topic, is what is that future going to look like? Because it may not look like the same thing 10 years from now, particularly as you look at the access to information that we have right now. I mean, my wife is great at asking Siri things, and I mean, we were in a conversation with a couple the other night at dinner time, and he brings out his computer and he's answering all these questions that we have with one another, and it really then begins to say, well, what does education mean now with the access of information, so media?
I do think, Provost Jones mentioned it, that UNH has the professional development and training or badges and certifications, and so there probably is competition going on. I will respectfully argue a little bit that there is benefit to a bachelor's degree, even if it's in the liberal arts, beyond just preparing one for a specific job when they graduate. It hopefully an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree reinforces a love of lifetime learning and thinking differently about things and being exposed to things that you may not otherwise be exposed to. So I hope we don't get to a place where no one's ever going to college anymore. We're just I shouldn't say just, but earning badges so we can get our next job. So.
I think that, what Representative Milo, we had a discussion back on March 27th about an article that appeared in the Wall Street Journal. And the article was, college doesn't need to take 4 years. And that was explained by Wayne at that time that you could do it in 3 years. There are programs you can do that in right now. What I'm concerned about is that I had a grandson that decided to go to school outside the state, but he was also accepted at a college in between Manchester and Hanover, in New London. And he opted not to go there because at that point in time, there were some really shaky financial issues going on within that particular institution. And he didn't want to get engaged in a program of study and find out it's pulled out, like we've had just one college pull out within the last week here in our state. So potential students want to enroll where there's going to be a program that's going to be there 4 years hence, 3 years hence, 6 years hence. And so that's one of the concerns I'm looking at personally, is that are we going to be able to sustain education the way we have it set up structurally and organization-wise now in this state? And can we guarantee that little Maureen here, when she wants to go get her 4-year degree, is going to be able to do it and end up where she starts? Or is she going to have to pull it and go to another one within our state? Are we going to consolidate any programs? We got nursing in all our institutions, right? I think we do.
We do. Yeah. As I get more clear on your thinking about the use of the word consolidation, in both 187A and 188, the university system, community college system, the word for our board of trustees is to create well-coordinated systems of public higher education. And I think that maybe that's the word as opposed to consolidation. Currently, each board is responsible for ensuring coordination within the respective systems. And what I'm taking from this conversation is the need to assure coordination between the two systems in a way that addresses that. I said, we may not need all of the space we currently have, but I think we need all of the locations we have because I think they add value for those communities as access points for education. So we may scale back what we're delivering. Now, I'll offer an example of what coordination might look like. 12 years ago, 13 years ago, with the last Great Recession, the federal government was flowing out money to community colleges through TAC grants. And one of the objectives at the time was to not create competition among our colleges. And so each college created slightly different versions of programs, which in retrospect means that we've got a lot of specialization and a lot of uniqueness. But there's not enough demand to fully absorb all of that capacity. We've got a couple of faculty who are leading an initiative now. This involves robotics, automation, advanced manufacturing, to create a core program accessible to students across the 7 colleges. The first 15 credits would be accessible to students anywhere, creates the foundation, includes 2 industry recognized credentials that are aligned with those courses, and then allows for specialization and focus based on what a region needs, what employers want in that area, what a student is interested in pursuing, allows us to create enough efficiency in that system and enough coordination to remove barriers for students and capitalize on some of the economies of scale that the future requires of us. Those are the kinds of things that I envision where a student should still be able to start almost any of our programs anywhere, but depending on how specific they want to be, may require that they make some accommodation, whether that's through online for access to the more specialized training or movement. And again, with the exception of Littleton and Berlin, which are fairly remote, if you happen to be, closer to Manchester, but you could still have access to NHTI, Lakes Region, we have enough proximity that we don't need to replicate certain programs because we think it's not unreasonable for a student to navigate those distances.
It's a huge issue. In the state that I came from, New Hampshire would be a small region. And it would be smaller than a borough. And so it's all mindset, and of course we're in New England, which if you weren't born in the valley, and your parents born in that valley and your grandparents born in the valley, you probably never served in the select board. And that's New England. So I think there's a need for us to be having these discussions. If not, we're going to, and we know we're headed to some cliffs right now in terms of financing, sustainability, and we can't be blind to those. So it's time to have some open discussion. And I think this is a good discussion, and I hope the task force can have equally as productive a discussion, and more so than what we're having just here, just cutting around the edge a little bit. Any other, yes, Representative Mooney.
Just a suggestion going forward on this commission in bullet 2, and it goes back to an earlier comment I made that improving accessibility and compatibility for students, that also be included there is advising or tracking. I think that is the deliverable by which a student can be assured that they are on track to transfer and attain their goal. Otherwise, all of these things on paper sound great. The things on advertisements and websites and, take this and that, it all sounds fantastic. But unless the student knows for a fact they're on that path, they're going to miss the mark. So I would just put that out. I don't want to edit an executive order. That's not my job description. But if I were, I would add one of those words, advising or tracking, to that bullet. Thank you.
You could advise the LSR though. Okay, are there any more questions from the committee today towards, yes, Chancellor?
I don't have a question. I have a brief public service announcement.
Oh, yeah.
As you know, President Jim Dean at UNH is retiring on June 30th, and the search committee has been named. Trustee Jamie Burnett is chairing, Trustee Kathy Green is vice chair, and they are conducting listening sessions with various stakeholders to provide input on what we in the state are looking for in our next president of the university. And there is a legislative listening session tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock in State House 103. There are also open sessions that are being scheduled. They're gonna wrap up these listening sessions in the next couple weeks. But if you search on UNH President Search, the university has a website that has FAQs and schedules and such that you can attend open sessions by Zoom also. But we thought it important to schedule a legislative listening session. So that's tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock in State House 103.
Okay, we could, Jen, is it possible that we could get notice like that out to the Education Committee members? Thank you.
Thank you.
All righty, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What we need to do as a higher ed study committee, where do we want to go? Like, do we want to gather any further information? And when we meet next, it's going to be harder because we're going to get into the legislative season here. But are there any topics that we want to be looking at in terms of higher ed? Or you just want to just take it as it comes? Oh, yeah, the governance. There was a report that when we talked merger, 2021, I think it was, there was a report that I was asked to put together a committee on in the legislature. And there was a report that was issued and that was sent to the Division II chairman at that time, Karen Umberger. And it dealt with a lot of the issues, and those issues which we dealt with are identified on the second page here under March 27th. We did discuss it here as a group. And the issues that we brought forward were governance, affordability, accessibility, vision for post-secondary education, institutional mission and vision statements, what's the legislative role, and at that time we were talking merger implementation and impact and any recommendations. That's all within that report. And it was done hastily, but we had a lot of input. At that time, we had the chair of the trustees, Joe Marone, came in and spoke. We had people coming up from NECHI and presenting their accreditation. We had folks coming in from the community college system and the university system to speak with us. We took a lot of input, and we came up with some issues that maybe need to be looked at too, even by the task force or in this other report, because we should gather as much as we can to move forward. So I can make that report available to everybody. No, I think you were on that. Yep. Okay, no, it was one that we put a joint committee together from education policy in the House and some from finance. And we were looking at this issue, and in the report, we gathered a lot, I think some very, very healthy information that should be considered. So I'll make that available to everybody. And that maybe we can go from there forward. One of the areas which we are concerned about too is the implementation of social studies and social studies help in the post-secondary level. I hope it's one of those 7 that are coming up, and where it says social studies in elementary ed. That's an important area that we're seeing our kids sliding in that subject area of civics and government and geography and history, economics. And we need to really pursue that, and we need some help from the post-secondary level. Okay, is there a motion to adjourn? Boy, everybody there. All in favor? Aye. We're out of here. Thank you very much, and thank you for coming today. Yeah. What time is it? Really?